If he's not traveling on business just about any other day, you'll find Tony Parella in his North Texas shop, carefully restoring a Harley-Davidson motorcycle that will soon be 100 years old. So in a series about Corvettes, why are we telling you this? Because Tony has already restored most of his Corvettes, which total more than 24, and they all have NCRS Top Flight certification, Bloomington Gold certification, or both. And at present, the collection includes every year of Corvette production from 1953 through 1982.
Corvette has so many different legacies, whether it's a racing legacy or a technology legacy, aesthetic legacy, a horsepower legacy. There's so many different directions you can go. You know, having one of every year is frankly a starting point. That's certainly not the end.
For Tony Parella, the end of collecting may never come. After all, he's been at it for years, and the collection is still very fluid. His Corvettes include the 64th car to be produced under the Corvette brand in 1953, a car that he bought many years ago as a basket case and personally restored to NCRS Top Flight condition. The C1s also include a rare black 54, which took concourse honors in Palm Springs 20 years ago, a first-year V8 in an immaculate 55 forest green Vette, and a 61 Corvette that's experiencing some temporary separation anxiety. C2s, among others, include a beautiful 63 10th anniversary coupe and its mid-year bookend, a 67 435-horse big block roadster with factory side pipes. And a jump to C3s includes a never-registered 78 pace car with only 400 miles. And there's another C3 that is one of a kind.
In our most recent program, you may recall Bob McDormand saying he fell in love with the first Stingray, the 63 split-window coupe. And honestly, who didn't? But Tony Parella knows the last Stingray was made in 1976, and he has it here. Not just the last year of Stingray, this is the last Stingray ever made, making it a very unique Corvette.
The Vette was a star during the nation's bicentennial celebration in New York City back in 1976, shortly after its factory rollout.
Started collecting Corvettes in 1990. My first collector car was a 1959. I've had a love affair with Corvettes since I was a young boy, and I said someday I would get an old Corvette. First one being a 59, that was my birth year, and that was my first restoration project.
And after owning the 59 a dozen years or so, he did something he almost immediately regretted.
I had an offer to sell the car that was a pretty good deal for us to sell it. Sold the car, and it went all the way up to Canada. I don't think it was loaded on the trailer, and I was kicking myself for selling that car, but I had cut the deal and I let it go.
But in a storybook ending, he found it for sale on the internet 3 years later and bought it back. The rest, as the saying goes, is history.
I can tell you whatever happens, if I sell all my Corvettes, that Corvette I will never sell again, I can promise you that.
Tony Parella admits to being a fanatic on documentation for each of his cars, paperwork carefully filed on the restoration, photos of the work, and receipts. But there's more to Tony Parella than just collecting Corvettes. Much more. The dream at the end of his Corvette Rainbow can be found in this architectural rendering in the foyer of his shop.
I'm collecting the cars in the first place is to build a museum for children's charities. That's my goal. Hopefully that'll be the finish of my life's work.
The world-class museum would carefully integrate the history of Corvette with modern American history, and each Corvette year model would be set in a diorama reflecting what happened in America during that particular year. Tony Parella was born in upstate New York with several fingers missing. He's quick to point out that he was fortunate. His family could afford proper medical attention and the numerous surgeries that allowed him to become a successful businessman as an adult. In 2001, he was about to start the Corvette Museum.
I had cut a deal with 2 hotels that were going to have about 50 acres of land just outside the Dallas airport. 2 hotels were going to lease 10-acre parcels on each end of that property. Proceeds from those hotels would pay all the operating expense of the museums. And then September 11th happens.
The hotels pulled out and the dream faded. A few years ago, Tony Parella sold off a fair number of the cars he had planned to put in the museum. But the idea and the plans for the museum are still very much alive. And is a Corvette collection ever really complete? Does a lifelong dream of a Corvette museum ever die?
Never. Never. There's always some angle to add. That's the cool thing about doing the museum. I don't think it'll ever be finished. You know, I envision spending the rest of my life on treasure hunts trying to add that one piece that makes it special.
And knowing Tony Parella as we do now, whatever he does will be special. We wish him well with his dream. Now, coming up next, another Corvette collection right here in the Lone Star State. In fact, just a few miles up the road. And while I'm a fan of virtually all Corvettes, you'll forgive me if I say these are my favorites. We'll explain when VetteCollections continues.